The galaxy had been in a fragile state for centuries. Peace was a distant memory as countless species fought for control of dwindling resources and power among them. The Tijar stood as the most feared and ancient race, with a reputation for merciless conquest. Their ships were dark and formidable. Their soldiers were ruthless and cold. They showed no mercy, no compassion, and no remorse. They enslaved entire planets without hesitation. Their empire stretched across countless star systems, bringing all life under their oppressive rule. Yet no one had ever managed to stop them, not until humanity entered the picture. The humans were a new species discovered on the edge of galactic space. They were nothing like the Tijar. They were primitive in comparison. Their technology was rudimentary at best, their fleets small, and their forces untested. The Galactic Council dismissed them as inconsequential, a weak species with no place in the war. They were wrong to assume the Tijar would overlook them, but they believed the humans would stand no chance in the face of such overwhelming power. After all, what could a species with no more than basic space travel technology possibly do against a race that had conquered whole worlds with ease? The Council's arrogance blinded them to the fact that the humans had something that the Tijar had never encountered, something more powerful than advanced technology, something the Tijar could not take away: humanity's spirit. Despite their primitive state, the humans were fiercely protective of their own. Their desire to defend their homes and families was unmatched. The first attack came without warning. The Tijar arrived at a human colony on the fringes of their known space, a small and insignificant world in the eyes of the galaxy. But to the humans it was everything. The Tijar expected it to fall quickly. Their ships arrived in a thunderous barrage of laser fire and destruction. They targeted civilian centers and military bases alike, with no resistance in their way. It seemed like an easy victory. But the humans fought back with a tenacity no one had predicted. Their soldiers were armed with makeshift weapons and outdated gear, yet they fought with a fury that stunned the Tijar. They fought with the desperation of those who had everything to lose, and the Tijar realized too late that this was no ordinary species. The battle raged on for days as humans used the environment to their advantage. They employed guerrilla tactics and outmaneuvered the Tijar at every turn, striking from the shadows and disappearing before the enemy could retaliate. The Tijar were thrown off balance. For the first time in centuries they had faced rebellion, but this was different. This was something entirely new, something they couldn't quantify. As the last of their invading fleet was pushed back, the Tijar commanders sent an urgent message to the Empire. The humans had become a threat. They were not to be underestimated. Yet the Council still refused to see the danger. They claimed the Tijar had merely overestimated the humans, and that it was only a matter of time before the inevitable collapse of human resistance began to unfold. But the humans were determined. They would not surrender. They would not fall. They had been underestimated once, but that would not happen again. The war had just begun, and no one was prepared for what was coming next. The Tijar were furious at the unexpected defeat. Their pride had been wounded for the first time in centuries. Their carefully calculated plans had faltered, and their confidence was shaken. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. But what truly angered the Tijar commanders was the fact that they had not anticipated the one thing that made humans so dangerous: their ability to adapt. The humans had taken their first losses hard, but they didn't crumble under the pressure. Instead, they had learned from their mistakes and quickly devised new strategies. The Tijar sent a second wave of invaders, far larger and more prepared than the first, thinking that sheer numbers would crush the resistance. But once again, they were caught off guard. Human ingenuity was something that could not be predicted. They struck at the heart of the Tijar's reinforcements with surgical precision, hitting supply lines and cutting off communication networks in a series of lightning-fast strikes that left the Tijar commanders scrambling for answers. Their forces were disorganized and fractured, a far cry from the impenetrable war machine they had once been hailed as. The humans had found their rhythm. They understood the nature of the war now. They didn't fight for glory or conquest. They fought because they had no other choice, because if they didn't fight they would lose everything. The Tijar had expected a quick and easy war, but the humans turned it into a drawn-out struggle for survival. Every battle was a battle of wits as much as strength, and with each passing day the humans became more effective in their resistance. The galaxy began to take notice. The war had raged for months, and the Tijar were still no closer to achieving their goals. They had suffered losses and faced humiliating setbacks against a species they had once written off as insignificant. Word spread across the stars about the humans' bravery, their resilience, their unwillingness to bow before the might of the Tijar. It was a spark of hope in a galaxy long ruled by fear and submission. Among the oppressed species of the galaxy, whispers began to grow about the humans and what they could do when united under a common cause. Soon, rumors turned to real action. The first galactic resistance groups began to form from species that had been enslaved or subjugated by the Tijar. Some sent small forces to support the humans. Others offered their knowledge of Tijar technology or their homeworld secrets. But the most important thing they gave was something the humans had not been lacking. Hope that they were not alone, hope that they could win. And slowly the tide began to turn. The human fleets, though still small in comparison to the vast Tijar warships, were becoming more organized, better equipped, and more determined with each passing day. The Tijar didn't realize it yet, but their empire was beginning to crumble from within. They had focused so much on crushing the humans that they had neglected their own borders and internal systems. Rebellion began to simmer across the Tijar-occupied worlds as more species saw what the humans were capable of and decided they wanted a part in it. Even Tijar soldiers who had once been fanatical in their devotion began to question their mission. Some even defected to the growing human-led coalition. The Tijar Empire was on the brink of falling apart, and no one had seen it coming. Not the Council, not the Tijar, and certainly not the galaxy as a whole. Humanity had become the spark that could ignite the flames of resistance across the stars. The Tijar were starting to feel the weight of their arrogance. Their once impervious empire was showing cracks as the resistance grew stronger and more coordinated. Humanity's role in the war became undeniable. Their innovative tactics and sheer will to survive had inspired a wave of rebellion across the galaxy. Planets once thought lost to the Tijar began to rise up, their people joining the human-led coalition in growing numbers. The once dismissed humans had become the symbol of defiance against the Tijar's tyranny. Humanity's ability to think outside the box, to adapt so quickly in the heat of battle, had turned the tide in ways the Tijar couldn't comprehend. They had expected to wipe out a weak species, and instead had encountered an enemy that refused to be defeated. It wasn't just the humans' military successes that stood out, it was their entire approach to the war. They understood that this fight wasn't just about military might, it was about hearts and minds. Humanity knew how to inspire people to fight for something greater than themselves. They didn't simply invade worlds or enslave populations. They fought for freedom, for the future of their children, and for their right to live without fear under Tijar rule. And it wasn't just the humans who fought back now. Entire worlds were joining them one by one. The first was a small mining colony on the edge of Tijar space, where a group of rebels had managed to disrupt Tijar supply chains and communication systems. The victory was symbolic, but it sent a message to the galaxy that the Tijar could be challenged, that their rule wasn't as unshakable as it appeared. After that, the resistance spread like wildfire. Planets began to send their best fighters and engineers to join the human forces. They shared technology, strategies, and resources, but above all they shared a common cause: the defeat of the Tijar. There was a moment when the humans' actions truly crystallized in the minds of the galaxy, a turning point when the Tijar made a mistake that they would regret forever. The humans had managed to capture a Tijar ship, an elite dreadnought used for planetary bombardments and strikes against enemy fleets. It was heavily guarded and nearly impossible to board, but the humans had done it. They captured the ship not through sheer firepower, but through cunning. They tricked the Tijar into underestimating them once again and used their own arrogance against them. The humans didn't just disable the ship, they took it intact and began to study it, reverse engineering the technology to use against the Tijar themselves. The Tijar were left in disbelief. Their pride had once again been shattered. The ship wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol. It proved that the humans could not only hold their own in battle, but could outthink the Tijar at their own game. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they could turn the Tijar's greatest asset into their greatest vulnerability, and that was something the Tijar could not ignore. From that moment on, the tide began to shift. More and more Tijar vessels fell into human hands, either captured or destroyed. With the humans' growing expertise in their technology, they had begun to build their own warships and fleets more formidable than anything the Tijar could have imagined. Each victory fed the resistance, and each defeat eroded the Tijar's grip on their empire. Across the galaxy, whispers of a human-led alliance spread like wildfire. No longer were they the underdogs, no longer were they the weak species struggling to survive. Now, they were the leaders of a growing rebellion, the champions of the oppressed, and the galaxy began to take notice. As the humans' reputation for courage and ingenuity grew, the Galactic Council had no choice but to admit the truth. Humanity wasn't just helping, they were winning, and they were leading the charge against the Tijar's tyranny. The shift in the galaxy was undeniable. Humanity's once dismissed role had evolved into that of a galvanizing force. The war was no longer just about survival, it had become about hope and defiance. The Tijar were slowly being pushed back on multiple fronts. Their once unshakable grip on countless star systems was starting to unravel, and it was all thanks to the unexpected alliance forming around the human resistance. The human-led coalition had grown stronger with every passing day. Entire star systems had thrown their lot in with humanity's cause, and the Tijar could do little to stop it. A small but effective fleet of human warships had been joined by rebels from every corner of the galaxy. Together, they had begun to form a formidable strike force, one that was capable of carrying out devastating raids deep within Tijar territory. The humans had not only adapted to war, they had mastered it in a way the Tijar never thought possible. Their military strategies had been built on an understanding of survival, not conquest. They knew how to stretch limited resources, how to fight with precision and timing that left their enemies guessing what would come next. One by one, the Tijar fleets began to lose territory. The human coalition hit supply routes and communication hubs, wiping out entire battalions in a series of blitzkrieg-style strikes that the Tijar couldn't counter fast enough. The once feared empire that had brought countless species to their knees was now on the defensive, and the humans stood at the helm of this rebellion. Their forces didn't just include soldiers and pilots, it included engineers and scientists too. Humanity's ingenuity shone through in the technology they had repurposed and created from the wreckage of Tijar battleships. Humans had reverse-engineered weapons and shields that surpassed anything they had once used. Their engineers designed ships that could slip past enemy lines undetected and strike with the element of surprise. They didn't have the numbers the Tijar had, but they made up for it with their cunning. They had learned from their battles and refined their tactics into a lethal art. And yet, as they pushed the Tijar back, the Galactic Council remained hesitant and distant. They had seen humanity's rise, but they still clung to their outdated beliefs that the humans were just a flash in the pan, that they were an anomaly that couldn't last. The Council refused to send any substantial aid to the human-led coalition, despite the clear evidence of their success. Some even claimed that the humans were merely delaying the inevitable, that the Tijar would inevitably regroup and crush them all. They failed to see what the Tijar themselves had learned. Humanity was not going to stop. The humans had not only fought for survival, they had fought for the freedom of the entire galaxy. They had united species that had once been at odds against each other under one banner, the banner of resistance against the Tijar's cruelty. And the Council began to feel the pressure as more and more worlds fell to the human-led coalition. Resistance movements from every corner of the galaxy joined the fight, sending resources, technology, and soldiers to support humanity's cause. One by one, the galaxy's former rulers, the Tijar, were losing allies. Their own subjects were rising up as the humans' victories continued to inspire more worlds to stand up and fight in ways they hadn't before. It was clear that humanity wasn't just a pawn in a galactic game. They were the leaders of the charge. The galaxy had waited for the Council, now facing an unstoppable wave of change, was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. Humanity had become the turning point of the war, and the Tijar were no longer an invincible force. They were a dying empire. The Tijar were now on the retreat, and they knew it. Their once unchallenged power was crumbling in front of their eyes, and no matter how many battles they fought, they could not stop the growing momentum of the human-led resistance across the galaxy. They had underestimated the humans time and time again. But this time, the T-Jar had no more answers. Their once unbeatable fleets were now scattered and broken. Their planet-wide weapons were being neutralized, and their most skilled commanders had begun to question their strategy. The humans had learned from every encounter. They adapted and evolved with each victory. And even when the odds seemed impossible, they found a way to turn the tables on their enemies. It wasn't just that the humans had better tactics, it was that they had something deeper, a unity forged by the fire of their survival instincts. When humans fought, they fought not just for their own freedom, but for the freedom of all species, and that fire burned hot enough to ignite entire star systems. The human-led coalition was unstoppable now. The once fragmented forces of resistance had coalesced into a well-oiled machine. Their combined fleets had gained the upper hand in space battles. They struck fast and decisively. They had mastered the T-Jar's own technology and used it against them. While the T-Jar were stuck in their old ways of war, the humans showed that flexibility was just as deadly as sheer force. Humans built alliances with rebel factions from every corner of the galaxy. Even the most isolated species came to trust the humans as their leaders and champions. The war had turned into something larger than anyone had anticipated. It was no longer about survival, but about changing the future of the galaxy forever. Humanity had become the symbol of hope for all those who had suffered under T-Jar rule, and the T-Jar were desperate to crush that hope once and for all. But the humans had no intention of backing down. Their most daring operation yet was set into motion, a strike against the heart of the T-Jar Empire itself, a daring assault on their capital world, a world that had been considered the seat of the T-Jar's power for millennia. The T-Jar had fought it impenetrable, but the humans were planning to prove them wrong. They had spent months preparing for this strike. Every victory, every battle had brought them closer to this moment. The plan was simple: infiltrate, disable, and destroy the T-Jar's last line of defense. The humans would send their most skilled operatives to infiltrate the planet's core systems, while their fleets would carry out a massive distraction campaign to draw the T-Jar forces away. It was a plan full of risk, but the humans had always been willing to take risks. This was their chance to deal a fatal blow to the T-Jar, and they were going to take it. They gathered their forces, rallied their allies, and launched the operation with a speed and efficiency that stunned even the T-Jar. The battle for the capital world was like nothing anyone had ever seen. It was chaos and brilliance combined. Humans fought with unyielding determination, infiltrating the heart of the T-Jar Empire and striking from within, while their fleets created enough distraction to keep the T-Jar off balance. But what truly set the humans apart was their adaptability. They didn't just know how to fight. They knew how to think under pressure. They thought several steps ahead, and that was their greatest strength. As the operation pushed deeper into the T-Jar capital, the resistance took full control of the planet's main defense grid and disabled the T-Jar's last great weapon, a planetary shield that had kept their empire safe for generations. The shield collapsed, and the human-led fleets swooped in for the kill. The final assault was underway, and the T-Jar knew their empire was no more. They had underestimated humanity for the last time, and now they would face the consequences of that mistake. The T-Jar were in chaos as their once mighty defenses crumbled beneath the unrelenting assault of the human-led coalition. Their capital planet had been taken, their fleets shattered, and their strongholds scattered across the galaxy like fragments of a dying star. The humans had proven to be everything the T-Jar never thought possible, and now it was too late to stop them. The Galactic Council had watched in silence as humanity's rise had reshaped the balance of power across the stars, but now they were forced to acknowledge the reality they had denied for so long. The humans weren't just survivors, they were victors. The Council finally relented and offered their support in full force. But by then it hardly mattered. Humanity had already set the stage for the galaxy's future. The T-Jar were losing more ground by the day with every failed counterattack. They lost more. Their empire, their cities burned, their fleets disintegrated, and their soldiers surrendered or defected. The humans had become masters of warfare, But more than that, they had become masters of morale. They had shown the galaxy that resistance could succeed, that even the smallest species could stand against the might of the most advanced empires, and prevail. The first sign of the Tijar's final collapse came when a large fleet of Tijar warships retreated from a key system near the galactic core. They were retreating not because of a tactical withdrawal, but because they had run out of options. They had no allies left, no resources to fall back on, and no hope of victory. Their fleet disbanded in chaos, and the soldiers aboard began to surrender in droves to the human forces who had once been considered nothing but an afterthought. It wasn't just the Tijar military crumbling. It was their entire way of life. Their empire had relied on fear and oppression, but now their subjects were rebelling. Even in the core worlds where the Tijar had once ruled with absolute power, their subjects began to revolt. Their cities burned and their leaders fled as the people rose up against the invaders who had terrorized their homes for centuries. It was clear that the Tijar could no longer hold their empire together. They had broken every rule of warfare and forgotten what it was that made them so dangerous in the first place. Their failure to adapt had been their undoing, while the humans had evolved and grown more powerful with each passing victory. The Tijar had clung to old methods. They had underestimated their enemies and paid the price with everything they had built. Now, as the final battle loomed, humanity was preparing for one last strike. The Tijar had retreated to their last stronghold deep in the heart of their empire, a fortress that had stood for millennia. It was a fortress built on fear and cruelty, but it was also their last hope, their final stand. Humanity knew the Tijar had no more tricks left. Their empire had been broken, and now it was time to end it once and for all. The coalition forces had gathered all their strength for this moment. Fleets of human warships filled the skies alongside their allies' ships. Warriors from every corner of the galaxy who had fought alongside humanity all rallied to this final fight. This would be the battle that decided the fate of the galaxy, the battle that would put an end to the Tijar Empire once and for all. Humanity's leaders addressed their forces with one simple message: we fight not just for us, but for everyone who has suffered under Tijar rule, for those who have lost everything, and those who will inherit the peace we create today. As the final assault began, the Tijar made one last desperate attempt to resist, but their forces were scattered and demoralized. They had nothing left to fight with except pride and rage against an enemy who had already proven they were too strong to be stopped. And as humanity's final push began to unfold, it became clear to all that the Tijar Empire was finished. It was no longer a question of survival for humanity. It was a question of redemption for the galaxy itself, and the Tijar had already lost the war. The final battle was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The Tijar's once imposing fortress world stood as the last bastion of their empire, a symbol of their unyielding grip on power. But as humanity's coalition forces assembled in the void, it was clear that this fortress was a mere shadow of its former might. The Tijar had fought valiantly, but they no longer had the strength or the unity to challenge the human-led forces. The battle for the heart of the Tijar Empire began with a massive assault on the planet's outer defenses. The human fleets, now bolstered by countless species that had once been enslaved, launched wave after wave of precise strikes, overwhelming the Tijar's dying defenses. The once proud Tijar warships, which had once carved through the stars with ease, now struggled to hold their ground against a united front of desperate fighters and revolutionary forces. The humans had fought hard for every inch of this victory, and they were not about to let the Tijar reclaim what they had already lost. On the surface of the planet, the last remnants of Tijar soldiers fought to protect their crumbling empire, but their efforts were futile. Humanity's tactical superiority, honed through countless battles, was on full display. The humans didn't just fight. They coordinated with precision, each squad, each ship, each strike working in tandem to break the Tijar's will to resist. As the human forces pressed forward, the Tijar found themselves being pushed back to their last stronghold, a massive citadel deep in the heart of their capital city. But even here, the humans were relentless. The Tijar could feel their empire slipping away, the walls of their fortress world crumbling around them. The human soldiers fought with a fury and determination that shook the very foundations of the Tijars' belief in their superiority. They were not just soldiers. They were the embodiment of every species that had suffered under the Tijars' rule. In the heart of the battle, one of the most symbolic moments of the war occurred. The human forces broke through the Tijars' final line of defense, and for the first time, the Tijar Emperor himself was forced to confront the reality of defeat. He had once believed that no force in the galaxy could challenge his empire, but now he was standing face to face with the unstoppable force that humanity had become. The Emperor's personal guard was all that stood between him and the human commander who had led the charge against the Tijar. It was a tense moment, one that would define the outcome of the war. The Tijar Emperor's arrogance had always been his greatest strength, but now it was his greatest weakness. The Emperor underestimated humanity's resolve, and as he prepared for one last desperate escape, he was met with an unwavering stand from the humans. They had already won. The Emperor's surrender was inevitable, and the galaxy watched as the Tijar Empire, once a force of darkness, crumbled before humanity's brilliance. As the last of the Tijar forces fell and the final strongholds were reclaimed, the human-led coalition stood victorious. The Tijar were no longer a threat, their empire shattered and their leaders in chains. The galaxy, once oppressed and divided, now had a new order. Humanity, the species that had once been dismissed as insignificant, had led the charge against the galaxy's most powerful empire and emerged victorious. But this was not a victory just for humans. It was a victory for the oppressed, for the fallen, and for the future. The galaxy had been saved, not by the strength of a single species, but by the unity of those who had once been powerless. Humanity's triumph had proven that even in the face of impossible odds, the will to fight for freedom and justice would always prevail. And as the Tijar Empire finally fell, a new dawn rose over the galaxy, a dawn built on the courage, unity, and determination of those who had refused to be silenced. The war was over. The galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy, once shackled by the Tijar Empire's reign of fear, was now free. The Tijar, once the rulers of entire star systems, were no more. Their empire lay in ruins, their fleets scattered, and their leaders captured. Humanity had proven that even the most powerful tyrants could be overthrown, not with sheer force alone, but with the strength of unity, courage, and resolve. As the human-led coalition surveyed the wreckage of the Tijar capital world, there was a solemn sense of accomplishment, but also an understanding of the gravity of what had been achieved. Victory had come at a tremendous cost. Billions had fallen in the war, and countless worlds had been devastated by the Tijar's brutal occupation. Entire civilizations had been lost, cultures erased, and entire species enslaved for centuries. The scars of the war would take lifetimes to heal, and the journey to rebuild the galaxy would be long and difficult. Humanity had not only liberated their own kind, they had freed the galaxy's most oppressed and downtrodden. Their victory was not a conquest, but a liberation. The human-led coalition, now united under a common banner of peace and equality, began the process of restoring order across the galaxy. Leaders from all the liberated species sat together in the great halls of what had once been a Tijar stronghold, now repurposed as the first council of the new galactic order. The humans, who had once been considered nothing more than a primitive species on the fringe of galactic space, were now the central figures in this new era. Their voices were heard in every decision, their ideas shaping the rebuilding of the galaxy. But the humans did not seek power or dominance. They sought to build a future of cooperation, one in which no species would ever again be subjected to the horrors they had endured under the Tijar. Despite the overwhelming victory, there was no desire for revenge. The humans knew that they had defeated the Tijar not through hatred, but through the resilience of their spirit, and they extended that same spirit of reconciliation to the conquered worlds. The once feared Tijar were taken into custody, their empire dismantled, and their leaders held accountable for their crimes. But even in their downfall, humanity offered them the chance for rehabilitation, understanding that vengeance would only perpetuate the cycle of violence. The Tijar, broken and humbled, would have to live with the consequences of their actions, but they would not be wiped from existence. As the galaxy began its long recovery, humanity's influence continued to grow. No longer a species on the periphery, they became the leaders of a united galaxy, guiding the efforts to rebuild and foster peace. The human way of life, forged through struggle and adversity, became a model for others to follow. It wasn't that humanity had all the answers. It was that they had learned from their mistakes, adapted, and never given up. Their story had become a beacon of hope to every species in the galaxy that had once believed they were powerless. Years passed, and the galaxy, once fractured and torn by the Tijar's cruelty, began to flourish once again. New alliances formed, and trade routes reopened. New cultures and technologies thrived, and old enmities faded into the past. But the memory of the war, the sacrifices made, and the lessons learned would never be forgotten. And it was humanity's spirit, its drive, ingenuity, and commitment to the idea that no one should ever have to live in fear, that would forever be the cornerstone of this new galaxy. The stars were now bright with the promise of a future of peace, a future built on the courage and tenacity of a species that had been told it couldn't win and had proven the galaxy wrong. Humanity had not only survived, they had thrived, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever.